right. So for those that are listening, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about your channel?
Dudes with Wrenches is the channel. And we collect things, mostly hoard things. I don't know what the good term for it is with the PC culture we have now. Collector, I guess. So I don't not feed my children and own things. So I'm not a hoarder yet. I don't know what the proper word is. But anyway, we work on a lot of different cars. We aren't really specific. Brand specific. There you go. We just kind of work on whatever we can get a hold of. So if it has four wheels and a motor, we work on it. We started the YouTube just for the reason of trying to get us oriented in a way to complete things. Everybody has projects. Everybody buys too many things they don't need. And you just let stuff sit around long enough that you get tired of staring at it and you end up selling it, etc. We're just trying to finish things. I have a lot of friends and myself that own a lot of project cars that never get done. So when we started our YouTube channel, the goal was to start and finish projects. And we've been doing it now about 2 years roughly. And we've actually finished a lot of things. 2020 was a big change for us because everybody has to work all the time. That was the point when nobody was working. So that's where we got a lot of, hey, let's get something done. Let's film it. Maybe somebody will want to watch it. Who knows? So that's kind of what we are. We're just fix stuff. We don't do full restorations. We haven't done anything like that. We just want to get stuff back on the road. We're not doing big race cars or anything at this point, but someday, maybe if we can get enough of the things we want running, maybe we'll go to that extent later.
Very,
Pretty basic stuff.
very cool. One of the questions I was going to ask is when you got started and how you got started, but it sounds like you started just a couple years ago, and your main reason was to help kind of get these projects done. So I hear you have a ton of project cars. Kind of going through some of your videos, I was seeing what you've got, the fire hazard Fairlane.
Yep.
That's a 1964 Fairlane. Do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
So that's kind of where we made the final decision to start filming something. And when we went and bought that car, it wasn't even something we went to buy. It was like many things. We didn't have anything to do on a Sunday. We didn't have a plan to go get a car that day. It just turned into I'd been talking to the guy on Marketplace, and the car just sounded crazier than I've ever really felt a car should be. And I was like, this is weird, but we're not doing anything, so we'll just drive up 2 hours north and take a look. He had a Mustang. My buddy might have been interested in the Mustang. We weren't really sure. And then he had this Fairlane. So when we drove up there to look at it, we were not intending on buying. I always say that. Not. Well, we went up there with some cash. The guy originally wanted $5,500. I went up there with $1,000 in my pocket, hoping, well, maybe something will happen. And then I actually brought a stack of Fleet Farm gift cards because they're money, right? I mean, so when we got there, we looked at the car. It was a basket case. I mean, house light switches on the inside of it. Every crazy little thing you think you could put on a car is on this car. And it's just out there. It was not something we wanted to buy. It was just crazy to look at. After talking to the guy, I tried to talk him down on the price. And more we started talking about it, the more and more I said, well, if we can get it today and drive it home, we'll make this deal. So we gave him $1,000 cash and a stack of Fleet Farm gift cards because he just wanted to see it gone.
Really?
We got to see the Mustang that he was also selling leave that he had sold before we got there. It was in worse shape than the Fairlane. But the guy who built this car was an eccentric. I'm not going to say he was crazy, but he was definitely different. He passed away, sadly enough. Both the cars were built by him. We were told that the cars were in car shows and won awards. I don't think they won awards for being nice. They just won awards for being different. And sometimes you can appreciate that about somebody building an old car just to be different than everybody else's. So we drove the car home 2 hours. It probably shouldn't have driven home. It was more one of those local drive around kind of cars. We actually had to take it to the O'Reilly's, tear a bunch of stuff off of it, fix a bunch of things before we even attempted to drive it. And that's not usually our MO. We usually just bring a trailer, throw it up on a trailer, and drive home and work on it when we get there. So this was kind of the first time for a lot of us on just like, hey, let's go give little to no money for a running and driving 64 Fairlane and send it down the highway and see what happens. And we filmed it. That was the first one we really just kind of said, hey, we're here. We got camera phones with us. Let's make a video. So that's kind of the original video that we did that was an actual full-length project car. Since we brought it home, I went through the car front to back. I've rewired everything. I don't want to tear the car completely down and change what it is, because I don't think I could ever build it as crazy as it is now. But I do want to make it functional and better. So the theme is staying the same. We've just gone through and made it reliable and literally not start on fire, because it was definitely heading that direction. It's currently going under the knife right now because it needs suspension parts and everything, because I went down the road of, hey, we're just going to throw some brake pads on it because they don't really work all that great, which then turned into you can't find the drums, you can't find the pads. Everything's a weirdo oddball size for 64 Fairlane. It doesn't fit into the common ones. So now it's just getting disc brake conversion, full tubular, everything, and just getting fixed correctly. So that's where that car is. And it's like everything else, waiting on a little bit more budget to make it drive again.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, that's I watched some of the video on that, and that is a unique car.
Yeah.
So you also have a 1967 Ford Galaxie, right?
Yep. And that was another instance of, well, talking to a guy on Marketplace, the price seemed really right. We collect a lot of cars. Occasionally we sell things we haven't in a long time. That car, to me, I just wanted a good basic two-door 60s cruiser. It's a 289 car with a two-barrel. It goes down the highway beautifully. When we picked it up from the guy, it was just the deal of he wasn't a mechanic. He didn't want to work on it. He had bought the car from the original owner and he enjoyed it for a few years. And then it started having little issues and problems, and he just didn't want to dump a bunch of money into it. So he just wanted it gone. So we went up there, made him an offer, and he gave it to us for a decent price. And we put it on trailer, even though it was probably in better shape than the Fairlane we drove home. And we drove it home. And then it just basic maintenance. We've gone through that car front to back. Like I tell everybody on, classic cars you pick up on the cheap, it's a good idea, even though if they run and drive, to look at everything. Because something with 70,000 original miles can often mean nobody's ever changed the rear end grease. Nobody's ever pulled a valve cover. It's been running since 1967 and everything is original. And that car was a perfect example of it. Needed a lot of stuff looked at. There was a lot of stuff repaired at some point when it was pulled out of whatever barn it was hiding in forever. But it did need a lot of general maintenance. Now it's a running and driving car, sitting in storage right now, but come the summer, it's just going to be a daily driver probably for a while.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think it'd be cool to have something like that, just as, like you said, a kind of a summer daily driver.
Yep.
So let's see here. You also have a third gen Camaro.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that one?
So I was raised on third gens, which good or bad. I don't like to talk bad about third gens. It's just third gens have a very love-hate relationship with me. I grew up with a father who collected cars and worked on. That's where I get it from. And it comes down to he owns a lot of really, really cool 50s and 60s cars. And while I was a teenager, we chose to build third gen Camaros. So it was just kind of those like, okay, they were cheap, they were easy to get a hold of, and they were fun to throw a Chevy small block in, upgrade some suspension, and rip around in them. They handled a lot better than a 1960s car. That's why my dad loved them. So when mine came along, it was my neighbor. He was trying to build a car with his son as a father and son project. It kind of got a little to the point where they weren't going to get it done. His son wanted something else. So he ended up selling it to me on the cheap. I picked up that car for $800 with a bunch of suspension work already done to it, a rebuilt transmission, and no motor. So because we just have motors lying around, because everybody has those, right?
Yep.
We pulled a motor out of an old square body Chevy we had sitting around, slapped it in there. The interior had all been redone. I think all we really did to it was just rewire the car a little better, put a new radiator in it, make sure everything worked front to back. I rebuilt the whole rear differential, which, pro tip, just because it's cheap to put a spool in, spools break things when you just drive them everywhere on the street. So it's solid spool, 373 posi, obviously, with just a built 355, nothing crazy. I got the transmission tweaked just right to where you can just ride the gas about half throttle and it'll bark the tires between each gear. And it's just a fun little rip around, throw it around a corner, handles like it's on rails. It's got all UMI suspension. It's 2-inch drop. It's original paint, 60,000 mile car. So there's no rust on it. Mice got into it really bad at some point. So the interior all had to be replaced. So it does need some interior finish work and probably some paint at some point. But with that car, long term, we want to upgrade the brakes. We want to change out the front engine cradle with a UMI complete engine cradle and some frame tie kit. And just make it into something that you could take to a good guys show and do maybe a little mini autocross or something. It doesn't need to be super powerful. It's going to probably be the best handling car I own because it was built that way from the factory. So that's kind of all we're going to do with it. I'm not in love with that car. I never have been. So it's just kind of one of those things of I have it. I don't have much into it. It might get sold someday, but it's fun to play with.
So you have way you have way more cars than just those three. I know. I've heard you talk about other projects you have. What are some of those other projects that you have around?
Well, so my wife, who I love dearly, has treated me very well as far as a husband that owns and collects way too many things. So I finally talked her into getting a classic car for herself. For the longest time, she wanted a very specific classic car, which has taken me almost 10 years to find. Because at the end of the day, I didn't want to buy another project or a restoration. I knew if I was going to be able to get something for her, she would want it to be drivable right out of the gate. So during COVID, again, we did finally find our needle in the haystack, let's say, of a 1966 Chevy Impala 4-door hardtop. It was very specific that she got a 4-door hardtop. That's what she wanted. I wasn't opposed to it. At the beginning, I thought, hey, that's probably going to be cheaper and easier to find than a 2-door. I was very wrong. So it was kind of those just wow, good luck finding one. When I finally found one, it was 9 hours from where I'm at. And it was one of those deals where I called the guy on the phone. It had been for sale for 6 months and hadn't sold. And I said, what do you want for it? And he threw us a price of 10 grand. And I'm like, if it's absolutely perfect, it's worth that. And we got a trailer, jumped in the truck, and shot across the state over in Illinois. And went and looked at this car. And it was one of those deals where, you don't want to believe somebody when they tell you a car has original 20,000 miles, never been touched, nothing's been worked on until you see it. And then you don't even have to have the conversation. It's just one of those yeah, that car definitely has no miles and looks 100% original. And he even told me, he's like, nobody's ever even taken the plastic off the spare tire. I mean, the car is immaculate. It's museum quality car. All that's been ever done to it is wheels and tires. He put a nice set of 17-inch American racing wheels on it, gave it a lot better look. It's a 250 inline 6 car, single barrel, 2-speed power glide, 308 rear end, and it's power steering, power brakes, 4-wheel drum, radio delete. So it's a really weird mismatch of like some old boy who didn't believe in V8s yet in life and also didn't want a radio. So it was just like, nope, give me the inline six because I trust them and I don't want to hear nothing but it. And I need a 4-door hardtop to take my kids to school or something. But that car is got its little blemishes on the paint. It's original paint, it's original interior. We brought that home, did a once over on it, checked all the fluids, changed everything. I was the first person to change the shocks. You know you have an original car when you pull the shocks, and they're Delco shocks. They were pre-existing before AC got involved.
Wow.
So it was like really nice setup. And I, to tell you the truth, I've looked for a long time. I never thought I'd find a car like that. My issue with buying her car was always I didn't want a car that a bunch of people had restored, molested, etc. We all know old cars. It's way more often to find one of those than it is to find something that hasn't been touched. And if it hasn't been touched, it's probably a little rustier than you want to mess with too, at least in my area. So she actually put 1,000 miles on that car in the first year we had it. So she drove it more than it's probably seen in a long time. And it's kind of needs just a few things, nothing major. Right at the end of last season, the radiator started leaking. I can probably get it fixed, but it's just cheaper to go get a nicer aluminum radiator. And then if we ever upgrade something, it's already done. So on that one, we'd like to just go through and do disc brake conversion, probably change some suspension components a little bit, just to make it ride nicer, adjustable coilovers, something to where you can keep a nice stance on it. And that was just going to be the car that she takes out on summer days and drives when she wants to. And it's probably never going to be a big horsepower car or even get swapped to a V8. I mean, if we do anything, we may just rebuild. I have a 292 and a 250 inline six that we can just go through, hop up a little, and throw in there as a, hey, look, it looks factory, it drives factory, and has as much horsepower as a 350 of that year. So that's kind of that one.
Where'd you pick that one up in Illinois? Where at?
Oh, it was right. It was an hour past. Would have been north of Davenport, right around the top. I can't remember the little town. It was a small town.
Okay. I was just kind of curious because I'm kind of in the center all the way up north.
Yeah,
So
this would have been
sure.
right in the northeast corner.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep. And the crazy part is the car came out of Chicago. And before it was in Chicago, it was in California. So the car was ordered, manufactured, and sold in California. Had literally no miles put on it while it was in California. And it was given to a classic car museum, which then it was sold to an auction house that used it to essentially market classic cars. They never sold it. They just used it as like, hey, come look at this all original, blah, blah, blah. And the guy who bought it, he actually bought it because he wanted to own one that was original because he was having a 65 Impala built. So he's like, I just bought this 2 years ago. I've had it 2 years. That's all he had it for. And other than that, the original owner and then a couple companies owned it and then him. So really the car's probably sat somewhere under glass longer than it's ever actually been on the road. And he only bought it, like I said, because he just I want to drive an original one because mine is getting built to the extreme. And he was explaining to us this like full tube chassis, 2-door 65 Biscayne, because it had to be Biscayne, but it was full LS airbags. I mean, the whole bit. He's like, I got 40 grand in just suspension parts. And I'm like, well, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's going to be a big change from the stock one that he was driving around to that. But it is pretty cool to hear that has been around that long without that many miles, and you were able to pick it up and get it running and have her driving that around. That's actually pretty cool.
Yep. And then it always comes to the conflict. You'll talk to people and they'll either say, A, there's no way it has that low miles. Or they'll be B, they'll definitely believe you and then ask you the opposite question of why are you driving it? And for me, I'm going to drive everything I own if I can get away with driving it. If I had to own something that I'm afraid to drive or it's too valuable to drive, I don't want to own it. And that's my opinion. Everyone can, if you want to collect Hot Wheels full size, more power to you. I'm not against you, but I'm not the guy that's collecting cars to stare at them. I want to drive them.
Right,
So,
exactly. So what else? I know you got a lot more. How many cars do you have in total?
well, it's an ever-changing list, realistically, but I know we're in the ballpark of about 36 vehicles. We could probably slim that down a bunch if we just started pulling parts and scrapping cars. Not all of those are running and driving cars. It's always that big question, like, oh, you have all these cars, but how many of them run? Everybody wants to throw that one out there. And at least for me, the better half run and drive. Now, stopping, brakes, little maintenance things. See, if you've ever been in the Midwest, you'll know brake lines just fall off vehicles for fun. So there has been a lot of vehicles just parked that were perfectly fine because a brake line blew out, and it's like, well, I'm going to go through and replace all the brake lines. I might as well replace the gas lines. I might as well go through the differentials. I might as well blow this thing into 1,000 pieces. And now it's a project, and I'm not ready for that project. So whoop, it just goes out to the farm. I am lucky enough to have a father who is more than happy to let me park things on his, 8 acres of land where he has all his things. So I am glad I have that, because if I didn't, I don't think I'd own, a third of what I have. And I think that's a big problem for a lot of people. You can only fit so many cars in your driveway, and then you got to store them somewhere, and then it just becomes impractical, and you got to manage your projects at that point. And you got to sell stuff. I've never had to do that because I always had the option of just sticking it out at the farm. So I'm lucky in that aspect. But I mean, as far as projects we have going on, for the longest time, I was really big into square body Chevys. I've had an ongoing issue with, just this year, I tell myself my New Year's resolution is going to be, I'm not going to buy a car. I'm not going to buy a car. It's not going to happen. No. I've been buying cars since I was 16 years old, and I'm 38. So it's a long time of buying cars. And every year I say I'm not going to buy one this year. I made it 4 days in this year. I have never successfully, since 17 years old, not bought a car. So that's a lot of years of buying cars. We've sold a lot of them. We've bought multiple cars, multiple years. But it does leave you with a lot of things to work on. I'm very good at thinking up what the car should look like and how great it's going to be when it's done. I've always been really bad at staying dedicated and actually getting things done. Hence the YouTube channel, trying to force ourselves to do something. I have aligned myself with a lot of good friends that have the same problem. So we have a lot of cars and a lot of lack of everything else. So we have mini square bodies. I collected them when they weren't worth anything, when you could buy them for $400 and drive them home and nobody cared. It was just a pickup. So we probably have 18 square body pickups just sitting around, and I have different shapes and models, and I've bought and traded. And my biggest issue I have now with square body Chevys is I know they've become very popular and everybody wants one, and I don't have that kind of love for them. I've always had a love for them because I enjoy using them as a truck. So then you run into that problem of, if I'm going to fully restore this and make it nice, I'm not going to put gravel in the back of it when I'm done.
Right, you're not going to use it as a truck.
Yeah, so then you get into this point where you're just like, okay, I'm going to start selling the ones that other people can restore, because I'm not going to have a slammed, fully restored 75 shape pickup. I never will. I don't want one. So all the ones I have left now are 1-ton 4-wheel drives, dualies, 4-door long boxes. Everything's a work truck version of a square body. And, like everyone who has a project vehicle and works on it long enough, they realize no project car, at least in my world, is a one-size-fits-all pony. You got to build them for what you want to do with them, for them to be good at whatever you want them to do. So I have a lot of plans for a lot of different ones that have specific purposes. And by the time it's all done, I'm going to whittle all those trucks down into 4 trucks that do exactly what I want them to do. And that's it. And it's always come down to, I don't really need one that bad. You can go and buy. I have an 05 Chevy pickup that sits in the driveway. So do I need to fix any of my square bodies? No. They can just sit there for a while. I have other projects that are more important. So they just sit out there and do their thing. And I occasionally go start them, move them around, and go, yep, I own that. It's awesome, isn't it? I do have a 78 that's actually sitting in my yard right now. It's one of the only half-ton four-wheel drives I have left. Everything else is 3/4 ton and 1 ton. I bought that truck because I just needed a truck. And like I do, I brought it home. I blew it into pieces to fix little things on it, and it has never gotten put back together. So since 2014, I've owned it as the truck that I needed to drive to work, and it never made it there. And it's almost done. It's been almost done for 6 years. I've touched every inch of the truck, and I just have kept changing what I want to do with it. And then it's come down to I have a definite goal with the truck, but it always falls behind other projects. And I occasionally start it up, drive it out, work on it a little bit, and then just stick it right back where it was. So it's definitely one of those, just like, it's the banished vehicle. It's never going to get finished. It's always there. I'll probably end up just selling it before I ever finish the thing. But it's one of those ones like we all have. If you just put a little more money into it, it'll be worth way more money. You just keep telling yourself that. And it'll never get done, but at least you can keep telling yourself that, and it justifies your bad habits. So,
Yep. So how many vehicles are actually at your place?
So I have a rule that I try to hold myself to, and that's no more than 10 in my driveway. So if I only keep 10 in my driveway, that means the city usually leaves me alone because I have enough concrete to park them on. Once I start getting more than that, I have to park them in the yard or off to the sides, and then I get letters, and those letters they're not good. They're not good letters. They start getting real angry. And I get it. I don't want to be that neighbor either. It's like I try to keep my yard nice. I try to keep my house looking nice, but it does start raising questions when it's like, you have 10 cars in your driveway. What kind of weird party are you having 24/7? It's like, no, I just like to go out every morning and just pick something else and drive it to work. Because that's the other part about being a car hoarder with too many actual cars that drive, is insuring all of them every year gets expensive. So, and licensing and just, yeah.
I hadn't
We
even
won't go
thought
there.
about that.
Yeah. That's the one that hits me every year where I'm just like, which ones haven't I driven this year? And am I going to drive them again? And then I always get into these little, I hold myself to the fire with certain vehicles where I'm just like, I'm going to fix that one. So I'm going to make sure I license it and insure it, because that'll force me to fix it. Right. And then I go through my list at the end of the year and go, I didn't even drive that one, and it's still not done. And that was a huge waste of money. Way to go, self. Good job on that, forcing yourself to do something.
So you have like one that you have to like title every month.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And my insurance lady has actually been really good with me now. So like I'll take things on and off my insurance constantly. It's just common. And she actually lets me text her now. So it's just, I just text her, give her the information. She's like, boom, done. I'm like, yeah, you're the best. And that's how we interact. It's like, that's pretty bad when you got your insurance lady on speed dial just to add and remove cars as you're going.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I feel like for most of us, that's almost the dream, to have that many vehicles that we could just pick up and drive on any given day.
And that's my goal. I would love to build some sweet cars that'll go down a track way faster than I want to be in them at. And I really like that idea. But for me, I love the idea of just being able to know that I can go out, get in a car that's 100% reliable. Maybe not perfect. We're not talking it has perfect paint or perfect interior, but it's reliable. And the easiest way to keep something reliable, and we're all aware of it, is to keep it generally stock. So they're generally stock cars. There's not a lot done to them. They're just pretty much original, and they run and drive. Are they perfect? No, but they'll get you anywhere you want to go. And we all have that, like, hey, let's build it into a race car. And we all know once we do that, we blow it into 1,000 pieces. We work on it for a lot of years. We put it all back together, and it's never reliable again, but it's fun.
Right.
So,
but you
I think
have
that's the big. You go on.
you have the factory cars, but you have a lot of the older I don't know, cooler cars that you can just get in and drive. So it's not like you have a ton of just, you run of the mill cars that you can go out there with having all these like classics or 60s and 70s cars. To me, that's what's cool.
Yeah. I mean, my dailies are my dailies, and I try not to drive them that much. I mean, I got a little 99 Nissan that I can't complain about that car. It's a perfect little car and it gets great mileage, and it goes to work and it comes back. And in the winter, I don't drive it. I usually drive this OBS Ford next to me that I picked up cheap, and it's a good truck. Uh, and that's my trade off. I tell everybody that, like, you own all these nice cars. I do. I find them cheap. I fix them myself. I don't have a lot of costs outside of my time into them. And I don't own a brand new vehicle. So
Right.
I don't have to worry about the payment every month that a lot of people have to, because they have to own something new that's reliable that gets them back and forth to work. So I don't have that burden, and I'm glad I don't. And I'm glad I don't have to commute 30 miles to work every day either. I mean, I drive 4 miles to get to work. So realistically, I own a lot of cars, and on any given day, they only have to drive 8 miles. So it's kind of like, they really don't
Yeah.
have to be that reliable either. I just like them to be.
Yeah. And for me, it's pretty similar. I mean, I have a 5-minute drive from when I walk out of my house until I walk into my work. And it's mostly a straight drive. I have like two turns and then it's one road all the way to work. So kind of the same boat. For me, my wife, she would always buy a vehicle, drive it until it was paid off, and then sell it and buy something else. So I eventually just convinced her to lease because now she can do that same thing, but it's brand new all the time and I don't got to fix it. But I'm more like you where I'll just drive whatever because I have fun cars that I get to drive in the summer. So as long as I have something to get me back and forth to work. So for me, I've had not as many vehicles as you for sure, but I've had probably 35, 40 vehicles. And the single most expensive vehicle I've purchased to this day is still only $7,500. So I've never spent any more than that on one vehicle, and that was a 93 Silverado, single cab, long bed on 33s. It had a crate motor dropped in it. It had rebuilt transmission and rear end, and it was exactly like you mentioned. I didn't use it as a truck. I didn't drive it in the winter. It was basically a summer pickup truck that I just drove around. So that's the
Yeah,
single most expensive vehicle that I've purchased.
nice. And now I'll admit, I bought a lot of cheap vehicles. I used to be the same guy that would say, if it's more than $800 or $1,000, I don't want it. And once you collect enough of them and you work on enough of them and you resell enough of them, you start realizing real quick, more money invested up front makes for a lot easier project down the road. And as long as you can acknowledge where you need to spend your money extra. I mean, don't go buy something just because it's shiny and give a bunch of money for it and then start sanding it and realize it's just 100% Bondo and chicken wire. That's when you get hurt. That's why I like to stick to stuff where I can look at it and I can go, this has been reshot once. It's the original paint. There's not much body work done to it. I would rather spend a little more money on really clean original and then not have to worry about body work and paint and interior, because all that stuff adds up. If you don't care about that stuff, I mean, that's a new trend. Everybody likes a little bit of ratty patina and things like that, which is fine. I'm not one of those guys primarily, but I'm not against anybody that is. As long as your stuff's reliable, I'm not going to hold anything against you. Don't drive stuff that shouldn't be on the road. That's where I'm at. But I have overspent on some cars that I really liked. I never knew I was going to be a Chevelle person. I've always had that jaded thing of just like, I don't want to own the standard, hey, first gen Camaros and Chevelles and these things that, like, it just becomes this group of people that I try to get away from, because like, oh, that's the Chevelle people and look at all the money they spend on their Chevelles and they're just overpriced cars that are very similar to anything else. And I didn't want to be part of that group, but I am part of that group. And I'll tell you, I spent too much money on the Chevelle I own, but it wasn't as much as what it should have been. So I feel okay about it. and I did want to build a car that was a go fast track car, and all that stuff had already been done to this one. So it was justifiable because I knew there would be money put into it if I hadn't done that.
Right.
So
So
yeah,
what year is that?
$7,500. That's a 65. So that was kind of the other running thing we did for a while. Is so we have a 64 Fairlane, 65 Chevelle, 66 Impala, 67 Galaxie, 68 Suburban, and then a 69 Chevy pickup, 70 Chevy pickup, and a 72 GMC pickup. Haven't got anything from 71 yet. But my dad's been doing that for years too. He likes to keep everything so he can consecutively get things out of every year. And that's kind of where I started doing too. So if me and my dad put our stuff together, we can pretty much outside of like 5 years go consecutively from like 31 to 87.
That's
So
insane, but
yeah.
awesome.
And yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? I mean everybody's a little crazy about cars. I wish I could just well, I mean, everyone asks you that question. Uh, what's your favorite car? What's your favorite brand? For me, you could give me anything and I could probably stare at it long enough and think about something I'd love to do with it and do that and enjoy it. You
Yeah.
know, there's very few cars I hate. I don't have a very specific one that I'm like, absolutely had to have this one. And there's one that I would say I'd love to have, a 62 Buick Special. They're just neat little cars. They're really hard to come by. And you have to get one that's perfect because they don't make any parts for them. So it's just kind of one of those, like, you can't fix a quarter panel unless you're willing to custom build one because they don't make replacement quarter panels for a 62 Buick Special. I would like to have one of those cars someday, and I'd like to do some neat things with it. That's the only car I could say, well, it's a one car you could have. But then I often just think, I only think that because I've never owned one. You know, I know a lot of people that seek out specific cars, like they want to be a first gen Camaro guy or they want to be a Chevelle guy, and then they go out and they finally buy it and they spent too much money on it, and you can just tell deep down they don't really love it. They just know they spent too much money on it to admit they don't love it.
Right. So
So
what's the oldest vehicle that you own?
the oldest vehicle I own would be a 1956. I don't, yeah, 1956. So I have a 56 Chevy grain truck that has a crazy story behind it that never should have been bought. And then I own a couple 56 Chevy four-door Tri-5s.
Okay.
But the 56 grain truck is 100% stock original, 14-foot tip bed, 265 V8, 4-speed, 2-speed rear differential. My buddy's a farmer. He went down to an ag auction about an hour and 40 minutes away from where we are. He said, man, you should see this really cool 56 straight truck that's here. I said, oh, that's really neat. Sent me some pictures. And I jokingly, I wasn't serious. I'm like, man, if that goes cheap, I'd love to have it. That thing's cool. And he's like, what's cheap? I'm like, if it goes for less than $1,500, let me know. Maybe you can bid on it for me. Okay. Stop talking. 2 hours later, he calls me and says, you got to come pick up this straight truck. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I got it for $1,200 and you said you'd buy it if it was under $1,500. And I'm just like, so I guess I'm on a straight truck now. And we drove down there and got in it and drove it home. I mean, it
Really?
was just, yeah. And we looked it all over when we're like, hey, it's got air in the tires and nothing looks too terrible. And there was a yardstick behind the seat that was the gas gauge. It even said gas gauge on the yardstick because they just stick it in the gas tank and go, yep, it's got some gas in there. Brakes kind of worked. We couldn't really get the floor panel apart because it was actually in the floor to get to it. And we're like, they kind of work. Yeah, it'll be fine. Trucked it all the way home on all the old back roads and gravel roads because we were very unsure of its usefulness at speed on the interstate. And we got it home. Well, yeah, it works really good. And that's when we decided to like check and see if the actual tip dump bed worked and everything. And all of it worked. PTO worked. But then when we tipped it up and started staring at the drive line, it's my father who walked over and said, you're missing the nut off the yoke on the rear differential, right? Oh no, I did not know that. The actual slider on the drive shaft was seized up enough that it didn't slide a whole lot, but it would have just pulled the yoke right out of the differential. And it was like, oh, cool. I'm glad we drove that home 2 hours.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so that could have been really, really bad. But I haven't really done anything with that truck. For a short period of time, I wanted to do a side business trimming trees. It was just something for extra money. And I did use that truck to do that. So I legitimately drove that truck around all the time, just loading it up with branches and trees all the way to the top and taking it out and dumping it. And it did its job. I mean, it still works as a working truck. And then a bump stop broke in the front suspension and it allowed you to steer a little too far. And it actually started rubbing a hole through the inside driver's tire that we caught just in time, because I'm really glad it didn't blow out, because I think I would have eaten that tire through the floorboard. And that was kind of when I was like, you know what? I think the front end needs looked at on this. I think it needs a new set of tires. It has a very old GM 5-bolt pattern. So it's really hard to get wheels that aren't split wheels. So changing tires is very dangerous, let's say. So it just kind of turned into one of those like, I'd love to do things with this truck. It runs and drives. It's a great truck. It's great for working around at the farm, but it does need some things that if you don't fix, you'll probably die if they go sideways on you. So it's just one of those like, okay, we're not going to drive this one anymore. Because I did used to actually take that truck to car shows, believe it or not. Like I would show up to this grain truck and people loved it because it's a farm community. So they'd see that. My grandpa used to have one of those. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And it's a cab forward. It's a COE. So, I mean, you're sitting right out there on the nose of it. And it's a very different looking truck. It's very ugly mostly, but you're not going to see another one very often. So it's kind of neat. The goal with that one has had a lot of ideas over the years. My dad's always wanted to turn it into a car hauler. For me, I've always just wanted to lower it, just get it right down on the ground, change the suspension a little bit, not do anything really crazy with it, or even make it workable. I don't care if it can haul anything. Just make it so you could get in it and drive it to the hardware store and buy lumber. I don't care. Just leave the flatbed on it, have the cool old patina cab, and just have her just right on the ground and just something you can drive around in.
Yeah.
When that's going to happen, I have no idea.
So I'm assuming you replaced the nut that was missing before you started hauling trees.
Oh yeah. That was the crazy part about that though, is because that was like a lesson in old technology real fast. Is we pulled the drive shaft apart, we pulled the yoke out, and we're like, oh, we need a nut. So we went and got a nut. But the seal was completely out in the rear end, obviously, because the yoke was walking in and out. And it's a rope seal. So it's like, well, where do you get one of those? Like they don't really make 1956 replacement rope seals. My dad, because he knows way more than I could ever imagine on old stuff like that, he literally, oh yeah, you just get this piece of rope and you put grease in it and you do all this and you pack it in there and you retighten and torque it, and boop, you're good. It never leak again. And I'm like, wow, the fact that that stuff ever worked. And you start talking rope rear main seals on motors and differentials, and it's just like, wow, this is somebody used to drive this. And the crazy part, I actually met a guy that when he saw me, and he's like, when I was a kid, 17-ish, he was a guy in his 80s. And he said, I used to drive one of these trucks cross country. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I had a Buick, bigger V8 in it to give it more power. But he said, I used to just haul stuff for a different company back and forth across the United States in one of these trucks. And I'm like, I couldn't imagine being in a 1956 COE, just getting beat to death 24/7, just like, this is the coolest job I've ever had. Like, nope.
Yeah. That would be kind of wild, but
Yeah.
So 56 Tri-5s as well, huh?
Yeah, my dad's always been a Tri-5 guy. He owns way too many of them. So I got big into that for a while. I've never myself had a running and driving Tri-5 personally. I've bought a few of them. I have them, but I've never fixed them. I got gung-ho about a 57 Bel Air that I have, and I kind of took it all apart and never put it back together, because at the time I got really interested in owning a G-body that I also had. So the G-body got my attention, and the 57 got pushed off over behind the barn. So Tri-5s are something I want to get back into. My opinion is they're somewhat overdone anymore. So it's just kind of one of those, not a big priority vehicle for me. But I do have a really nice 56 four-door my dad let me have that is the extreme amount of patina. And I'm not a huge patina guy, but this is one of those ones that's just like, you cannot replicate the patina that is on this car. It's been painted like 3 different times since 1956, and it's all faded through every color. And that car actually used to be our family car. So like in the 80s, all of us kids used to ride in that car. That's why my dad drove Tri-5s all the time until, they became more valuable than what a daily, was to drive. So that car actually rear-ended somebody while he was in it, while we were all in it. So the windshield's broke, the front end's a little messed up, but the frame's fine. And it has a chain they wrapped through it when they took it out of the 4-car pileup that it was part on. So it has like chain marks across the roof, and like it's just got all these little weird things, but like the car isn't rusty. So it's just kind of, well, it'll be a really neat car someday to throw drivetrain components in and just drive it looking exactly the way it is right now. And it's been a car that has been in my family since the 80s. So I think that one will be a neat restoration to just have a nice patina driver. But there again, not on the list. It's just waiting.
Yeah, I mean, it just blows my mind listening to some of the cars that you have, and they're just like, yeah, we'll get to that one. That's
Someday.
And so the G body, you still have a G body?
So my first car I ever personally bought with my own money was a 1980 4-door Malibu. And I've never shied away from 4-doors. It's like, I'll buy any 4-doors, same as I'll buy a 2-door. 4-doors are cheaper. And that was my first, I'm going to fix this car up and drive to high school car. My dad and me went out and found it. 60,000 original miles. Very clean car. Little old lady had it. 305 2-barrel. Picked it up for like $400. Drove it home. I drove that through high school. I ended up doing some dumb things with it. So it's like any high schooler. You think you got something that's maybe kind of fast or cool, and you beat the crap out of it way too often, and it kind of goes south on you. But that car always had a weird dead spot. No matter what we did to that car, if you'd accelerate, it'd fall flat on its face. So we changed the intake, we changed the carb, we did all this stuff. Couldn't get it to fix. And it's like, what is this thing doing wrong? And then we finally figured out in 1980, they actually had a recall on cams in the factory 305s. And yeah, it was missing a bunch of lobes. So it didn't run good. So me and my dad, because we didn't want to spend a lot of money on this car, we did a cam swap in the car. We just pulled the grill and just slammed the new cam in there. And, my dad, like he always does, let's just put a bigger cam in. Why not? So put a bigger cam in a stock 305 that had nasty heads and smog system, and put a bigger intake and a carburetor on it. And it actually ran a lot better, but still a 305. And I had a buddy that had a really nice Cadillac at the time. And that car only had an 85 mile speedometer. It had highway gears to the moon. We didn't know how fast that car would go. So we took it out one night on the highway and just said, pull up beside me with the Cadillac. Cadillac will do like 150. We're going to see what this Malibu will get to. So we took it down the highway for about 15 miles just to get it up to speed, because it was winding for days and floating real bad once it got there. But it got up to about 127. And that's when we watched the oil pressure just go. And it's like, yeah, I think we cooked her, because it was taking all it had to get that far. And we took it home, and I had this idea, and I said, I'm gonna build this car, and I'm gonna build it into a sleeper. I always wanted a sleeper, and we started building a 468 big block that we punched out from a 454, and I bought a whole other chassis for it. I was gonna tub it. I was gonna do all this. And then I was going to drop this 4-door body on it and make it look as stock as possible and have this gnarly big block and everything done to it. And then I found a 2-door G body. So then I went, I'm going to do it all to that one. And the 4-door got set off to the side. I started building the 2-door. And that was fun for a while, until I thought, I want a first gen Camaro, because that's cooler yet, right? I already got this really built big block. I just want to put in something neat. So I went and looked at one and came home with a 76 AMC Gremlin. And that was all bad decisions after that. So I did lots of dumb stuff to that car until I just got tired of owning an AMC anything and sent it on its way. And by that point, I had a two-door Malibu that was unfinished, a four-door Malibu that was unfinished, and all these things just sitting around, and 72 GMC pickup that I drove all the time at that time. And that's when I joined the military and just kind of went, bye stuff, I'll be back someday.
So
and just kind
whatever
of went on a
happened,
whole other journey.
what happened to the big block then? Did you put that in something?
Actually, I ended up selling it to my father because it's already half built. And he was going to put it in his 55 Chevy pickup. And it's never made it in there. It actually is still sitting on a stand in the back of the garage. And it's one of those someday, maybe it'll go in something. He's got a lot of projects that it could go in. And then since the military, I've just gone around collecting up things that everyone says were valuable. It's like, oh, you can't get Chevy big blocks. They were becoming rare at a time, and now everybody's giving them away because of LS motors. So I went around buying up Chevy big blocks, for instance, and now I got like 14 of them sitting in a barn. So it's just kind of, I got enough of them. I get, Chevy small blocks. I don't even know. My dad will sit there and tell you all these things are super valuable. He's the reason I'm a hoarder, because he's worse. And you can't sell that stuff. Can't give it away. They don't have it anymore. And the reality of it, he's right. I've actually come to the conclusion that he's very much right. You can't just go out and buy a 454. You can't just go out and buy a non-board stock 350 4-bolt main anymore. They are valuable. Everybody's used them all up. I do get jaded when people have the conversation about LS is the end-all motor. You got to have one and everything. I get that way because I don't need to own any more motors.
Right.
I have enough. I don't have to go out to a junkyard and try to find one. And the reality of it is, it took me a while to understand that everybody tells you, just like yourself, an LS motor is the only way to go. And it is, because it's the only motor you're going to go to a local pick-apart and be able to get. You're not going to go there and find a 454. You're not going to go there and find a 350 small block. And if you do, it's probably not one you want. So it's junk. And then if you want to go out and buy one, you're going to buy one that needs completely rebuilt and still have to build it. So you can buy an LS motor, you can throw some parts at it, you can make it run because they're super durable, and make it go fast. It's the most affordable go fast motor you can purchase. For me, I've never been interested in going fast. I'd like to with something, but it's not high on my chart. It's not the thing I have to do. And I own lots of old GM steel. So I don't have a big thing with LS motors. And, I try to be like, is it just because I don't like them? No, it's not because I don't like them. It's just because I don't need to like them. So that's where I'm at. And we've definitely gotten off the topic of owning cars. We're LS talking now. Oh,
But yeah, I mean, when you've got that many engines that you can just go choose which one you're going to drop into whatever project, I mean, why would you need anything else?
Exactly. I almost feel that you collect all these things forever. You either got to use them or get rid of them at a certain point. So if I just change gears today and say I'm an LS guy now and I'm going to go build LS motors, and what do all that investment, all that, I just throw that all away? Yeah. Who needs that stuff anymore? Yeah, it's old.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, someday I'll probably LS swap something. It'll probably happen, most definitely. I'm intrigued by it at some point. But I have put a lot of skill, knowledge, and tooling and everything into knowing how to rebuild a big block, knowing how to rebuild a small block. So I can do that stuff with my eyes closed. I've been taught since a very young age.
Right.
So I have it. I'm going to use it. It's just like that third gen we talked about. I just bought a car without a motor. I needed a motor. I put a 355 in it that we knew ran good. Boom, running and driving car. That cost me nothing.
Right.
To where I know, for me, if somebody said, let's put an LS motor in something, I would spend 3 times as much to get an LS motor put in anything than me just going out to the barn and getting a big block, doing some work on it, and slapping it in, because I already own that big block.
Right.
So really hard for me to make that active decision to be like, I know the LS motor's better. I know it's more durable. I know I could put a turbo on it, make way more horsepower, but I don't want to do any of those things. So I just want to be affordable and drivable.
So it sounds like you need to take all your projects that don't have engines and start putting one of those engines in until you use up all those engines. Then you have a reason to go buy an engine, which would be an LS.
There you go. and, and the worst part is when you collect enough big blocks, you start realizing you don't need any of the small blocks you have. Because at the end of the day, you go, well, I could put a small block in that, but I could also put a big block in that. So then everything gets a big block. And then at a certain point, you just go, does everything need a big block? Like, I don't know. The third gen probably would have gotten one if it fit better. So
if you have 14 roughly big blocks, how many small blocks do you have sitting around?
we lose track. They're stacked up. They're everywhere.
Really? That many?
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, I have a lot of square body Chevys, but I bought a lot of square body Chevys, and they're mostly truck blocks. And you can pick up square body Chevys back in the day around here. You could get them for $200 and drive them home. They were rusty or nobody's get out. I mean, they weren't restorable. It wasn't like anybody was doing it harm by just junking it. But I mean, we would scrap all the parts, just fill up the barns with truck parts and bezels and pieces and alternators and starters, and just take small block 350 Chevys out and just stack them up. Just throw away Chevy trucks. And it feel bad because those Chevy trucks are worth a lot of money now, but then you look back and you realize those Chevy trucks were not worth fixing. They were absolute trash. So I do kind of take offense to anybody. I've had some people like make claims like, well, all you do is because we scrapped stuff for years. They're like, yeah, but you scrapped all these perfectly good cars and you kept all these junk ones. And it's like, they're all pretty junk. I mean, these are the better ones, if that tells you anything. Those other ones were so bad we couldn't keep them. But that's Midwest for you. I wish I was in Arizona or something collecting cars that could just sit there and not get rusty sitting still.
Right. So how many people have you had that try to come by and buy your cars or see everything that you've collected and want to buy stuff?
My dad used to have a problem with that a lot. He's mostly scared everybody off locally that wants to do that. We did have problems in the past with people jumping the fence in the lower acreage and stealing car parts. That became an issue. So, it's my dad doesn't sell anything. And not because he doesn't want to, just because my dad believes if he's already paid for it and he's spent this much money, he's going to ask an outrageous amount. And occasionally he'll sell something for an outrageous amount, but he usually puts it so high that nobody wants to even talk to him about it. So, but like he said, he goes, if somebody's going to give that to you, then you can get rid of it. And I've done the same thing. I'm not saying I haven't. But it comes down to we have a lot of things. People want them and people want to come look at them. But I'm really bad at selling things. And so is my father, because we both have a problem with people in general that want to come and either don't know what they're looking at or want to offer you some ridiculously low price or act like they're doing you a favor to get it off your hands. And it's like, well, we don't need any of the above. So
Nice. Have you ever done a video that has all of these vehicles that you have around in a video?
no.
I feel like that's a huge opportunity to be able to show all these different vehicles, and for you that would be huge content to be able to do videos on all these different vehicles that you do have.
And I do try to be very forward on the fact of I don't own all the vehicles set out of my dad's. He gets kind of upset sometimes, let's say, of he has a lot of stuff that he doesn't want people knowing he has, because it's exactly what you just say. He doesn't want people coming and asking him if he wants to sell it, because he doesn't. Most of my stuff sits outside because we have buildings, but they're all full of his cars. And that's fine. I'm not upset about that. That's his stuff. It's his land. He's just letting me borrow space. So But I do not film some things when it comes to my father's like, hey, I don't really want that online, everybody knowing that I have all these things here, and then asking me if I want to get rid of them. So it does become a pick and choose on how I film and what I film. And there's a lot of times we'll start something up and move it just so it's not in a row of things that people are going to start asking questions about. And when you do hoard vehicles and you do own too many things, you do get this negativity about it where people are just either telling you you're just letting it go to crap sitting there, or you should really do something with that or sell it to somebody that will. And my reality with that has always been, if we didn't save it back in the day, if we wouldn't have bought it, there's nothing saying it exists right now anyway. So
Right.
us having it or us going into the junkyard 20 years ago, it's irrelevant. So you're not going to force me to do anything by trying to egg me into telling you that I'm letting it go to waste because it's just sitting underneath a tree somewhere. Nothing outside has that much value. If anything was that great, perfect example, I'll just throw it out there. My dad has a 57 two-door delivery. It's a full panel. It's mini tubbed. It's everything. That vehicle doesn't sit outside. He's got a
Right.
56 two-door, doesn't sit outside. It's that those kind of things where it's like everything that needs to be kept is inside. And that's one of my biggest problems right now. I've fixed enough cars that are nice enough. They'll have to be kept somewhere. So, I mean, this year I'm gonna have to come up with, since building costs are so high, well, we have to build something because this is the first year I've had enough complete cars that I want to keep under a roof. I have to actually start paying for storage. And that has always been a fundamental issue with me is if you own too many cars, you have to pay to store them somewhere. You need to revisit if you need those cars.
Yeah.
Because if you can't afford to house them in your own house, maybe you should focus a different direction. So that's just my opinion. I mean, if you want to store stuff, that's fine. I just view paying someone to store your stuff as just wasteful money. So
Agree.
I'm gonna spin the investment, build a building out of my father's so I can put up to 5 cars in it, roughly is what I'm looking at, just so I can stop paying for storage. Because I'm storing my Chevelle, my Galaxie, and my Camaro right now. And it's like that's just money going out that doesn't finish project cars.
Right. Exactly. So you don't have room at your place to build a shop or garage or anything like that, or is it
I
just
would
better
love
to
to.
do it out there?
I would love to build something, but the city does not agree with my wants. And I bought a full acre of ground in town with the assumption that, hey, there's a huge backyard back there. I could put a building back there. That'd be cool. Until the city went, no, you can't. You just get to mow that. And I said, what? But it's mine. Like, what do you mean? Nope. You can only have as many square foot auxiliary structures as what your home accumulates to. So because my home is 1,100 square feet, the garage I'm sitting in is 960 square feet, which leaves me very little extra square footage to add any extra auxiliary structures. So the only way I can get around that is by attaching the current garage to the house. And that's actually a bigger investment than just building something to store some cars in right now. Long term, that's probably going to happen. So then I can put up another garage back behind. But then it comes down to if I ever do build a garage back behind, it can only be 1,000 square foot total auxiliary structure once you've done this, all these crazy rules. So even at 1,000 square feet, that's not a huge shop realistically. And I would like to have 2 lifts and a bunch of other things. So long term, I'd like to have a way nicer shop, but I'm still always going to need a place to store cars, period. So that's why it's just a quick fix for now to give myself that space out there and then be able to long term be able to store and fix things here.
That's not too bad. I know we have some similar rules here where I live with structures like that, and there is a nice piece of land. I think it's an acre too, not too far from my house. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes away, and it's right next to some commercial buildings. So I thought that'd be a nice piece of land to build a shop on. And I got a hold of the city, and they're like, nope, you can't do that unless you own the adjacent property or you build a house. You cannot just build a shop, and then it becomes the same thing. So if I want a big shop, now I have to build a big house. So I kind of gave up on that idea.
Yep.
So it becomes basically you got to find something commercial around here. So if I want to build a shop, I need to find some sort of commercial property, maybe something that's already got a shop on it.
And then it goes back to, for me, my parents live out in the country. It's all just fields out there. It's the great state of Iowa. Just look at corn all day. Um, I could move out there, but over the past 20 years, living in the country in this area has turned from, if you're poor, you live in the country because you're a farmer. Now all the farmers are rich enough that if you want to live out where they own all the land, it's going to cost you a lot because farm ground is not cheap. And that's
Right.
if you can even buy it. So it's come down to, if you want to go out and live in the country, good luck finding a piece of land. Good luck finding a home. And if you do, you're going to pay 3 times what you're going to pay to live in town for the same thing. And you're going to have a well, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have a 25-minute commute every day to work. So it comes down to, I don't love living in town, but I can't afford to live out of town at this point and still have the ability to have project cars. And it's not cheap to build multiple cars. It's probably financially ruining me, to tell you the truth. I'd be a much wealthier, better off person without them. But what's the fun in just having money? So
Yeah, I was gonna say you might be more financially stable, but you wouldn't be as happy.
no. And I have often had those, like, regret hoarder, and like when you realize you're a hoarder, and I regret this. Why did I waste all my money on all these things? And then you justify it by this or that and the next thing. But I've bought and sold a lot of cars over the years. The money I've made off those cars has allowed me to buy more cars and more parts. I'm definitely not ahead by any means, but I do have nice cars that have a value. And at the end of the day, if I did want to liquidate everything just to have money in the bank, that's not off the table. And that's why I don't always, I'm not saying waste. Anybody can spend their money on what they want to have. I do steer away from certain investments, like putting a lot of money into something that isn't worth anything and will never be. Things are cool and you can throw a lot of money at them, but I've always just tried to, hey, if I'm going to put money into this, I want to get it to a point where it's good and reliable and drivable, but it still has a value. If you go cutting it into a weird craziness and just put a lot of money, I mean, we've all done it. I used to be really big into front wheel drive 90s era GTPs and Regals. And that is like my initial, I should have never wasted money on these things. Because at the end of the day, I spent too much to have them to begin with, because all they were doing was losing money. And then we pulled the motors out, put board, pistons, cams, bigger superchargers, upgraded transmissions, chrome moly axles, okay, let's make this front wheel drive car fast. And then you blow them up 3 times over and you had fun, but you look back and you go, yeah, that was a really bad investment. And I never want to do that again. So I'm glad I finally grew up enough to know, just go build a third gen Camaro or an El Camino, or you got to learn when those things are fun, but they're not worth the money you're throwing at them, and to the extreme they end up getting to. And I guess you always learn that with age. Some people never do, and some people just love their shit boxes, and it's great, and that's fine. But if you're going to want to own a lot of nice stuff, you can't keep making those investments.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked about a lot of project cars. Are there any cool ones or any other ones that we've missed that we haven't talked about?
Well, Tri-5s, we've talked about past owned G bodies. Fairlane, the Fairlane is going to be my, I don't know, definitely bad decision car. Weirdly enough, 64 Fairlanes actually have a really good value. I didn't know that until I bought it. So I thought it was just a four-door beat around 64 Fairlane. I didn't realize in 1964 they made what was called the Ford Thunderbolt. It was a two-door version of that car that was a factory drag racer that was absolutely amazing. Fairlanes are really weird. They change the body style pretty much every year. So 64 was a 1 year only Ford Thunderbolt. So yeah, it's a four-door, but people like the four doors because you can make them in to a Thunderbolt or make a replica or a lot of things. So it drives up their value because there's not a lot of them. So my car has a lot of crazy done to it. And I would like to keep on that theme. And a lot of people call me crazy for wanting to do this, but I don't have a stock of old Ford parts lying around. And I'm not big into swapping things in that aren't Ford or swapping things in that aren't Chevy. I'd love to do that someday, but I've never been a guy that has done that. And I really like the sound of a Ford V10 straight piped. And that's really all I'm getting after. I'm not trying to be fast, cool, or reliable at the end of the day if you talk to most people, but I really would like to put a V10 in the Fairlane. And it's something that's becoming a lot more of a realization for me. And I want to get that done sooner than a lot of the things. So that car is going to get finished. I'm actually going to re-release the entire series of videos. They aren't out there right now of buying it, fixing what's been fixed up to this point, showing you kind of what the craziness of the car was. I am going to get it running and driving again probably for this summer. And then once I have storage and I can just kind of tuck away all my other cars and projects for a little while and free up some more space in this garage, it's going to go under a real heavy knife and it's going to get full tubular everything. It's going to be getting a cage. It's going to be getting a V10. I'm just trying to figure out how to put it all together affordably. And we're going to build essentially a custom car with a four-door 64 Fairlane body wrapped around it. And it's going to be a V10. And long term, it's going to be a V10 with a Whipple supercharger. That's the end goal. And it's going to be crazy. It's not going to be a 64 four-door Fairlane in the aspect of, hey, it's just some four-door Fairlane. It's going to be bright. It's going to be loud. It's going to have crazy interior. Definitely probably going to have a wing that's larger than it needs to ever have on it and some air dampeners. And it's going to look like something that should be on an autocross track. And we're just going to enjoy it. I want it to have power steering, power brakes, air conditioning. I want to be able to drive that car and just daily it if you wanted it to and be nuts and have people. Because the craziest part about that car after we first got it and started driving it around, I've owned a lot of neat cars. I have an all original 66 Impala that people will walk right by at a car show and never give it a glance. People walked from across a car show to look at that 64 Fairlane, and I don't know why. It was one of those things that just, and then everybody wanted to ask you questions about it, and all I could say was, I didn't build it. It's that crazy. I bought it that way. I wish I could say I built it, but I didn't because my mind never would have come up with that. And I like that. I mean, I don't care if I have the coolest car, the fastest car, or whatever. I like a car that other people enjoy. And that car, no one's ever said anything negative to me about it. They like to come out and they just like to talk to me. And I enjoy that aspect about the car culture and being a car guy is I really like people that just want to walk up and talk to you about your car and tell you about cars they've had and just stop you wherever you're at because of your car and how it reminded them of somebody they knew with one or their father or their grandfather. So that's what I want to build with that car. And that I do want to get actually focused on that build and get it done. And I think that's a good series for YouTube to really give the all the way from when we bought it, making it reliable, making it a driver, showing you that you can pick up a 64 anything and drive it home 2 hours, spend $1,000 on it, make it reliable, and then turn it into the craziest thing on four wheels. You don't have to just buy everything and blow it into pieces.
Right. So what did the V10s come in? Is that like the Thunderbirds?
So what the V10 came in was on all your large trucks, E-Series vans. I think they're 6 point something liter. They're a modular motor, so I mean they're Triton variant overhead cams. Uh, I've been looking into a lot of it. Excursion is probably my best bet. If I can find a two-wheel drive Excursion, I can pretty much harvest everything out of that and just swap it right in. A lot of Fox body stuff, and I don't know what generation Mustang it is, but it'd be like 2003. Whatever ones came with a 4.6 liter. A lot of those pieces can work with those modular 5.4s and everything like that. So it's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. I don't see a lot of people doing it with those V10s. It's going to be kind of, I don't know, not an original idea, but different. And just have something where I can just build it, make it all work, make it all drive, and then maybe buy another motor and another setup and build the just living snot out of that one and then swap it and
Okay.
make everything in a way that swapping is easy. So at the end of the day, you can just take things in and out of the car with ease. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that when you see these guys with these Pro Street whatevers and they're tearing out motors and changing transmissions in an afternoon. Yeah, they do that because those chassis are built to do that. Everything's easy once you build it that way. So that's kind of the other goal with this car is to make it reliable, but also build it in a way that it's super easy to work on.
Yeah. I don't know what engine I'm thinking of that was in the newer Thunderbirds. Was that a V10 or V12 maybe even?
So we're talking last generation Thunderbirds, like little convertible coupes.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what they ran in those.
because I know somebody that has one, and I was thinking it was a V10 or V12, but now I'm
Hmm.
not sure. That's when
Yeah.
you said V10, that's what came to my mind. I wasn't even thinking of the 5.4.
Yep. No, this is the V10s. It was mostly in trucks, and I think they did them all the way up to like 2016 or even newer. They had some bad generations in there, the same as Tritons did. But I say the same thing when everybody starts telling me, well, that's a horrible motor. Why would you want one of those? All the trucks I've ever seen that have them have 300,000 plus miles. They all make 300 horsepower and 400 and some foot-pounds of torque. I mean, I'm not shaking a stick at those numbers.
Right, right.
So, yeah, they're just in a 10,000-pound truck, so they're slow.
Yeah. One
Yeah, I
other
think that
vehicle.
car, oh, like I
I
said,
was,
I think that car comes in at about 3,200 pounds. So that kind of power, I think, would make it move just fine.
yeah, and it's like you said, it's going to be unique and it's going to be something that people are going to come talk to you about, which I think is cool. One other car that we haven't talked about is the Volvo that we are doing this YouTube meetup build is one of your vehicles as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So the Volvo is a car I acquired simply for the purpose of the city was going to tow it. And if it didn't get moved off the street, it was getting towed. So my brother, his friend that lived with him at the time, said, it's got to go. It doesn't, transmission's broke, is what they said. And they told me all these things that could have been wrong with it. I drove over there. I gave him, I think, $50 for the car, if that. And it was just, here you go. Here's $50. Give me the title. Load it on trailer. Drug it out. Throw it out the farm. I figured at some point scrap price was going to get a little better, and I was going to make more than $50 off it. So I mean, that's the short and dirty of that whole car. And then over the years of it sitting there, we kind of went, oh man, we got this fourth gen Camaro sitting off in the weeds. It's the 6-speed. Maybe we could drop a V8 and a 6-speed in it. That'd be kind of cool, But it's just never like, Volvo wagon. So when it come down to it, once we started doing this YouTube thing and these live streams, everybody said, well, let's show us some of your cars. And I showed them that one. People kind of got a little excited about it. And I mean, we could LS swap that. And it's like, if you want to, realistically, I'll let you have it. Because at the end of the day, it saves it because I'll probably never build it. It is so far off the list of cars for me because I have so many other things that are going to get built before Volvo ever will. So somebody wants to LS swap a Volvo, I'm more than happy to bring it down and say, ta-da, get to it. Because I think it'd be a neat car that way. It's just not neat to me, but I appreciate other people's vehicles. I don't it doesn't have to be what I like to be liked.
Yeah. So that's how the whole Volvo build got started was just I think it was Wasted and Stuff with Cletus both saw it and kind of had that same thought. And
Yep.
And then
So
it
we
just
just kind
kind
of said,
of,
yeah, we should do this. And it's like, okay.
and then it just kind of morphed into this whole YouTuber group build. And we're
Yep.
what, about 5 weeks away from that starting.
Yes, it is. And I've actually been spending a lot of time because I did all the videoing on pulling it out of the weeds. I actually made that car run again. It always ran good. The transmission didn't work. And the original story on that car was, well, it's got some module because it has winter like economy or something buttons that you got to select before the transmission will go into gear. And all the things blinking on the dash while it's running lets you know that something about that isn't working. And it's a module on the side of the transmission. And I was told, if you just replace that module, it'd probably be a good running and driving car again. I didn't care. I just parked it in the weeds. So I actually started staring at that when I pulled it out because I'm like, it'd be cool, even better to maybe like crazy thought. Let's drive it. Because initially the build was going to happen at a much closer to me location. So initially I was like, it'd be cool if I could drive this thing 2 hours down the road and then tear it apart and put an LS motor in it. Just kind of like a resurrection story, or will it run, if you will. So when I got it out, there were little mice in it. The previous owners, the car was never cleaned out when I went and picked it up. It was literally like took it on a Thursday because they got told it was going to get towed on Monday, and nobody ever cleaned it out. It's been sitting out there for years. And it's just full of stuff. And it's like, oh, cool. Smelled really bad inside. And everyone who was part of owning that car worked at McDonald's. So I think food was free and they didn't throw anything away. So it was always just in the car. So not great. So when we pulled it out and I made it run, it actually has reverse. But what I found out is it blew a transmission cooler line. And throughout the whole car, and you'll see it in the videos I'm putting together, there's like a ton of training fluid because they just kept putting training fluid in it and it was coming out on the ground. So the death of that car was just due to negligence because you were never going to put enough training fluid in that car to keep it in there. It's literally spraying out a cooler line. So they burned the transmission up because it kept running so low on training fluid. Because that's when they'd add, you'd add training fluid when it stopped moving.
Yeah,
So
of course.
how many times do you get to do that before the train just goes, nope, I'm done? So where they thought it was a module, no, the training's cooked. It needs a transmission. So that kind of killed the whole idea of making it a resurrection project. And then once I got farther into it, I realized a lot of the wiring harness on the injectors and a bunch of other stuff had been chewed by some mice. So it might be interesting for old Cletus because we're going to get into this thing and figure out what's chewed up inside the car too, and probably chasing out wires for hours. But that car runs like a top. So I kept the motor. We might do something crazy with it. Since we've started YouTube, we always get down that hole. We'd like to just work on things that need to get fixed. But then you always get those crazy ideas like this would be a cool YouTube video. We all do it. Once you're in it and you start filming and you start understanding what it's about, you want to maybe just make something that people just want to see, not for any good reason, just make something crazy. So we've come up with ideas of like, hey, we got this inline 6 Volvo motor. Let's put it in a 4th gen Camaro. I don't know. Nobody's done that before because it's a bad idea, but hey, we got all the stuff.
Yeah, we have the stuff here, so why not?
Yeah, we have the technology. We will make it worse and poorly put together. But that's YouTube for you, right? I mean, some of that stuff is more popular than actually fixing a real car. So
I do very much believe that.
yeah.
So one of the funniest stories I've ever heard you tell, and you can go into as little or as much detail as you want, is the O'Reilly's story. I've heard you tell that on one of the live streams, and I don't know why, but that story just cracks me up every time I hear about it.
So let me tell you about O'Reilly's. They didn't like me when I lived on the other side of the Iowa. Over there by the Illinois. Those people around there are weird. But I have anger issues. I'm not in any way, shape, or form denying that. I have been known to have fits of anger. I don't generally direct them at people, mostly objects and things that get in my way. And I acknowledge it, and I try to be a better person because of it, because I kind of go off the handle. So disclaimer there. There's the disclaimer. Not always mentally kept. So I had a 99 Buick Regal GS. She was supercharged and upgraded everything. And it liked to eat wheel bearings like nobody's business because torque steer was a thing. I knew how to change a wheel bearing on a 99 Regal GS in about 20 minutes because it was a common thing. I'd break axles or I'd break wheel bearings. You throw it around a corner and you nail it with over 400 horsepower in a front wheel drive car, things break. So that car would always get parked for the winter. I literally put a wheel bearing on it before it went away for storage. I brought it out. It had been about 6 months. Instantly had a problem. Like I didn't even drive it hard. There was no issue. And it was just, I had a wobble in the front end. The ABS lights are coming on. I'm like, that's what happens when the wheel bearing goes out. I know because I break them. But that one's new. So went to the parts store, wheel bearing in hand. We all know warranties are great, but it doesn't pay for your time. It kind of upsets you. This brand new part you just put on literally broke sitting still. Went in there, didn't realize I was talking to not only the manager of the store, but the owner of the local franchisee. So, very important guy, evidently. And he thought he could help me. And sometimes I'm very grateful for intelligent parts people that are helpful and can help me. But generally, that's not the case. So I always kind of take the wrong attitude towards it. And I presented him with my wheel bearing and I said, this is broke. It's factory defective. Obviously, it has no miles on it. And he said, well, it's been 6 months. What do you mean it has no miles on it? I was like, well, you might be thinking logically that I broke this somehow over the last 6 months and I'm now lying to you because it's been 6 months and I'm telling you it has 0 miles and that doesn't seem logical. So his questioning already started to upset me because I knew where this was going. And then he proceeded to go down the road of explaining to me that if you over tighten said wheel bearing and you don't properly torque it, that can trash a wheel bearing in a short period of time, which I went, I know. Yep. And then he looked up the history of wheel bearings that I have bought and I went down the path of you buy a lot of these. Yep. I know. So then he started to explain to me how to install them again. And then proceeded to explain to me that because I buy a lot of these and I'm obviously not following the directions on the installation of said wheel bearings, that this is not warrantyable and he doesn't really care to have my business anymore. And that's when I proceeded to get slightly upset about the fact that I'm very aware I break wheel bearings. The car does that. I'm more than happy to pay for them. I'm not the guy that just keeps bringing them back and warranting them. You can see I've never warranted anyone that I knew broke because of me. This one broke because of them, the manufacturer. And I'd like a new one. And they're expensive. And I'll be on my way. Nope. It's not going to happen. So I had said wheel bearing, and because I have bad impulse control, I threw it and just so happened to hit a very large glass wall they call a window. And pointy bits and windows and heavy wheel bearing objects, they don't get along. And that's when I know poor decisions became bad decisions very quickly. And then there was some police involvement and it was a whole lot of just, let's talk our way out of this the same way we talked our way into it. So I wasn't allowed to go to O'Reilly's anymore. And that was a very, very expensive day. And I still had to go buy a wheel bearing. So not much more to the story than that. Make better life decisions. Don't let your anger get the best of you. And always make sure you read the fine print on warranties because
That one
it's going to
was
bite you at some point.
That one was very expensive wheel bearing.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
And you don't live on that side of town, is that what you're saying?
I don't live on that side of the state anymore, so
Okay.
it's not a huge issue. But there was a large time where I lived on that side of the state where it was like, why don't we go to O'Reilly's? And I went, I can't go to O'Reilly's because it wasn't like I could just go to the other two in town because he wasn't just the manager, he owned them. And that's not the guy you want to upset right then and there.
Right. But you're good with
So,
O'Reilly's near you now.
yeah, to tell you the truth, nothing against O'Reilly's. Maybe it's just a deep seated O'Reilly's hate for me. I don't really know. But I don't go there here either. Like, I go to AutoZone and Advanced. And for whatever crazy reason where I live, because we're in a tri-state area, so we have South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa all together. They all have a parts store, which makes it weird because I feel like they all carry enough that if they were one parts store, they would actually have parts, but they all carry enough to where you have to go to all three of them in the same day just to get enough parts to fix something. Like this, I put lug nuts on it. I had to go get lug nuts from every store to get enough lug nuts to put the front tires back on.
I
It's
do
like,
remember you saying that.
yeah, and it drives me nuts. But it's like I literally in like a 12-mile radius, you can go to 3 Advanced Auto Parts or 3 AutoZones or 2 O'Reillys. So at the end of the day, I usually end up going to the other 2 because the 2 O'Reillys is going to have the same problem, and there's only 2 of them. And the
Right.
other 3, I can get enough parts from all 3 to make what I want. I mean, I have that problem a lot with drum brakes. Like, I need a hardware kit, I need pads, I need drums, I need an adjuster. None of them will have all those things in one place. If you want to order it, we can get it to you in like 3 days. Or you can drive across town and pick up. It takes you 3 days to drive your own. Okay.
Right. You got the little parts truck that they drive around all the time. You can't just
Yeah.
go.
I'll be back in 2 hours. You give me a call. Because that's one of the best things about where I live too. I live in kind of I don't know, a treed area. I have 20 acres right off the back of my property. It's all owned by a cemetery. So I don't have a lot of really neighbors per se, just on the one side of me and across the street. So I'm happy with that. Full acre, not a lot of neighbors behind me or around me. Just the dead people. It's fine. No big deal. They don't create a lot of ruckus. But 3 miles from me, I have an Advanced Auto Parts. So I mean, really, that's probably why I go there the most, because if I needed to, I could walk there. So
Perfect.
yep.
Well, we've been going for quite a while here.
All right.
Is there anything else that you want to let everybody know, or do you want to go ahead and let them know where they can find all of your content on the different platforms, and then what kind of information or what kind of content you will be putting out next?
Well, for me, you can find me at Dudes with Wrenches on YouTube, Dudes with Wrenches on Instagram, and now, maybe possibly for a limited time, Dudes with Wrenches on TikTok. I'm not sure how much I love that platform. I don't. But for whatever reason, TikTok loves me, and things have gone through the roof, which I don't understand. But I'm dabbling in all 3. I'm doing poorly at 2 and TikTok for whatever reason well. So you can come see me. It's all kind of similar but different content. Upcoming for us is going to be Fairlane, possibly a building. And other than that, not much really. Just break fix how to's. We did a lot of work on this nice old OBS Ford, and I think somebody might appreciate that. So we're going to show you how to tear one down and put one back together. Maybe try out the whole how to YouTube videos, because we haven't done so well with the other ones. But we just keep trying and see what happens.
And then after that, we will be rolling right into the Volvo build, which there'll be plenty of content across plenty of channels. So hopefully that helps all of us grow.
Yep. And I think at the end of the day, with that build, if I get no subscribers from it at all, which is not going to happen, we're all going to get something. I just think the idea is very sound. I think it's a really good opportunity to take a car that was never going to be anything and turn it into something, which is everything that I'm about at the end of the day, and then do it with a bunch of people that have the same ideals to make that happen. So it should be a really fun build, a really great build, and maybe start something that, you know, maybe we could do again in the future.
Yep, and that's what I say. I think it's going to be a cool experience. Most of us all see each other weekly on these live streams or talk in our group chats often. So it'll be a cool chance for all of us just to get together, hang out. I'm sure there'll be plenty of shenanigans and lots of work getting done. And overall, it's just going to be a good time.
Oh yeah.
So, all right. Appreciate you coming on here and talking with us, and everybody listening. Make sure you go check out all of Dude with Wrenches social media.
I really appreciate you having me.